The sound of shattered glass broke the quiet hum of Umami House. Just as the clock struck 2:30, Malik Thompson looked up from his station to see a woman in a soaked designer dress slumped awkwardly against the bar. A bottle of premium sake lay dripping across the floor. Her platinum hair hung limp, her lipstick smudged like the remnants of a storm. The marble steps nearby gleamed under the soft overhead lights. Beautiful, but dangerous. One wrong move, and she could fall again this time. Harder. Malik moved toward her with careful intent. "Ma'am, let me help you," he said, keeping his voice low, his palms visible. He'd been here before. Not this exact scene, but the feeling, the quiet risk of being the wrong man in the wrong moment. A black waiter offering his hand to a wealthy white woman who looked barely conscious. That kind of help could get twisted fast. She flinched at his touch. "I don't need charity," she muttered, trying and failing to brace herself against the wall's cherrywood paneling. But her eyes, half-glazed, half-aware, narrowed in on him. "You're not like the others," she said suddenly. "Why are you being nice to me?" Malik didn't have an answer ready. Maybe it was how she reminded him of his mother after a double shift, exhausted, but still proud. Or maybe it was the quiet part of him that had grown tired of watching people drown in plain sight, while everyone else looked away. A black SUV pulled up curbside. He guided her out, still unsure whether she'd remember any of this come morning. He didn't see the red light blink from the corner ceiling camera, but someone else did. And by the next day, that moment of kindness would come back to haunt him. For 3 years, Malik Thompson clocked in before sunset and left long after the last table had been cleared. That he never caused problems, never raised his voice. Management called him dependable, which was just another word for invisible when spoken by men like Charles Whitman, a man who wore respect like a tailored suit and practiced racism like a silent ritual. Charles was the general manager at Umami House, a sleek, high-end fusion spot with gold accents and glass walls that pretended to reflect transparency. But behind those walls, power moved in whispers. And Malik had learned early that men like Charles never said anything wrong, but always meant something worse. That on the surface, Umami House was a beacon of excellence. But behind the scenes, Malik had begun to notice the pattern. White servers were promoted to front of house within months. Black and Latino staff were shifted to back roles or quietly let go. No one ever said it out loud. They did not have to. His mother, Lena, had warned him about men like Charles. She had scrubbed offices downtown for over 2 decades and understood the quiet weight of being watched more than being seen. Malik kept his head down. He worked, he saved, he stayed careful. But all of that changed the morning after the barstool incident. The first thing Malik noticed when he arrived was how quiet the air felt. It was not the usual hum of prep and chatter. Something was wrong. Chef Kenji Sato, the head chef who barely spoke outside the kitchen, gave him a strange nod. Curt, almost like a warning. "Malik, come with me." "Now," he said, motioning toward the office hallway. Charles Whitman was already waiting inside, leaning against the desk with a manila folder in his hand. He smiled, the kind of smile that always preceded something sharp. "Take a seat," Charles said, flipping open the folder with deliberate slowness. "I have received a formal complaint about your conduct from a very important client." Malik's stomach twisted. "What kind of complaint?" Charles tapped the folder. "Unprofessional conduct. You escorted an intoxicated guest outside the restaurant. That violates our safety protocols." "I helped someone get home safely," Malik replied, choosing his words with care. "She could have fallen. She was alone." Charles raised a brow. "That is not how it looks from the footage. And it is certainly not how she remembers it." The word struck like a slap. Malik felt his chest tighten. "Are you saying Genevieve Carter filed a complaint?" Charles did not answer directly. He simply lifted a stack of still frames from the security footage, each one printed, time-stamped, and arranged like evidence at a trial. "She is a high-value guest," Charles said calmly. "We cannot afford misunderstandings, especially ones that invite liability." Malik understood then. It was not about what had happened. It was about who it had happened with. He was not a threat until he stood too close to power. Until he reached out his hand to help someone people like him were never supposed to touch. He felt the weight of the room pressing in. His record meant nothing. His intentions meant even less. "So what happens now?" he asked. Charles folded the file. "You are being released from duty." Effective immediately. It is in everyone's best interest. There was no apology, no exit interview, just silence and a sealed envelope handed over by a nervous assistant. When Malik stepped outside, Chef Sato followed quietly and pressed another envelope into his palm. "I kept your tips from the last 6 months," he said. "They are yours." "I knew this might happen." Malik nodded. No words came out. Rain met him at the sidewalk like it had been waiting. He did not bother with an umbrella. His thoughts moved heavier than the drops soaking through his jacket that he pulled out his phone and called the only number he trusted. His mother answered on the second ring. "Malik, you were calling late." "I lost the job," he said plainly. There was a pause. "Did you do something wrong?" "I did something right." Lena was quiet, but not surprised. "Come home. We will talk." Back in Queens, the same. Two-bedroom apartment smelled like detergent and black coffee, just like it always had. Malik sat at the kitchen table long before Lena arrived from her cleaning shift, a pile of notes and printed schedules spread in front of him. "What is all this?" she asked, setting down her purse. "I am trying to understand something," Malik replied. "I think it started long before last night." He showed her the scribbled names, the timeline of staff changes, the notations he had kept without even knowing why. There were patterns. Names of employees of color who had disappeared quietly. Shifts changed without reason. Complaints filed against the wrong people, or not at all. Lena scanned the notes. "You remember Mr. Thompson from my office job? He made sure I was always on the dirtiest floors. Said it was about rotation. But it was not. It was about control." "That is exactly what Charles did," Malik said, just with better words. They sat in silence for a while, mother and son, both carrying invisible bruises from years of being just good enough to survive, but never safe enough to thrive. "Are you going to let it go?" she asked eventually. "I do not know yet," Malik answered, "but I know I cannot pretend it did not happen." Somewhere in the corner of his bag, the envelope with his final paycheck remained unopened, but on the inside of his notebook, something had shifted. This was not just about him anymore, and he was not done. The message came just after midnight. A simple text. No introduction. No small talk. Just coffee. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Corner Deli, 83rd and West. We have much to talk about. Malik stared at it, unsure whether to believe. His thumb hovered over the screen. He did not respond. Not right away. He barely slept that BY morning. Curiosity outweighed doubt. He arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a booth in the back. The deli was the kind of place that served lukewarm coffee in heavy white mugs and smelled like grease no matter the time of day. Not the sort of venue billionaires wandered into, which made it all the more strange. Genevieve Carter entered exactly on time. She wore jeans, a pale blouse, and no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a low bun, and gone was the dramatic glamour of the woman from the restaurant floor. She looked like someone trying not to be noticed. She slid into the booth opposite him and wasted no time. "You were fired because of me," she said flatly. Malik's eyes narrowed. "That is what they told me. That you filed a complaint." "That is a lie," she replied, pulling out her phone. "This is the only message I sent to Umami House after that night." She held the screen toward him. The email was short. Subject: exceptional service. She had thanked management for his kindness, praised his professionalism, asked them to commend him. The timestamp was from the same night. Malik read it twice, his breath caught. "Charles said you accused me of misconduct." "I know," she said. "He used my name because he thought it gave him cover. I suppose he thought I would not notice or care." Genevieve leaned forward, lowering her voice. "But I do care. And there is more. I am not just a customer. I am an investor. My family holds a minority stake in Umami House through our hospitality group. I have been watching Charles Whitman for a while." Malik sat back. The room tilted, slightly, not from dizziness, but from the sudden shift in how everything connected. "I have seen the hiring numbers," she continued. "I have seen how many Black and Latino employees have been let go or pushed into the kitchen in the past year, all under Charles's management. And when I started asking questions, he shut down. That is when I started digging deeper." She pulled a folder from her bag. Inside, employee schedules, HR memos, internal reports. Malik recognized names, people he had worked beside, then watched disappear without explanation. Every page told a story that until now had remained in whispers. "I have been building a case," Genevieve said, but I cannot do it without someone on the inside, someone the staff trusts, someone who has seen it happen. Malik flipped through the documents. Names, notes, dates. The pattern was undeniable. You think others will talk? He asked. I think they will talk to you. She paused, then added, and there is something else. I am launching a new restaurant. It is called Mendori. It is going to open in Harlem in 6 months. I want you to manage it, train the staff, help design the team structure, and if you want it, take equity. Malik looked up slowly. You are offering me a job. I am offering you a chance to build something better. But it is more than that. You were not just collateral damage, Malik. You were a threat to the system Charles built. That is why he pushed you out. Because you made the mistake of caring. He let the words sit. For so long, he had told himself he was imagining it. That what he saw was not what it seemed. But here it was, in black and white. And Genevieve Carter, hotel heiress and investor, was asking him not to forget it, but to do something about it. He closed the folder gently. I will help, he said. But not because I want revenge. She nodded. I did not think you would. I will do it because I know exactly how it feels to be erased. Genevieve extended her hand across the table. Malik took it. Something had shifted. A new role, a new mission, a new sense of clarity. And for the first time since he folded up his apron, Malik Thompson did not feel small, that he felt ready. The next morning, Malik sat alone at his kitchen table with a notebook, 2 pens, and a list of names that he picked up his phone. The first call went to Janelle Briggs, a former hostess who had been let go 6 months ago after a customer complaint that never seemed to exist. She answered after the second ring. I knew it, she said after hearing Malik's voice. I knew you did not just disappear for nothing. The second call went to Samuel Green, a server who had trained Malik in his first week at Umami House. He had left quietly last fall after being written up 3 times for things he swore never happened. Late orders, missing cash, kitchen mistakes, both. Janelle and Samuel agreed to meet him that afternoon, and they both said yes.by evening. The team had grown. The next message Malik sent was to someone still on the inside. Dante Cruz, a kitchen assistant, responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. Then, a text. I see more than they think. Tell me what to do. For the next 2 weeks, Malik, Janelle, Samuel, and Dante built a case the way only people who had lived through it could. Quietly, carefully, and with purpose. Dante began collecting small but powerful things. Photos of the weekly schedules, notes from team meetings, emails printed from the staff room computer, voice recordings of Charles Whitman making comments he thought no one would ever question. Each file, each piece of paper, each clip showed the same thing. People of color were being slowly pushed out, demoted, reassigned, fired for things that white staff were simply warned about, or not even questioned for, and none of it was by accident. Meanwhile, Charles Whitman carried on like nothing was wrong, still greeting high-end clients like a showman, still praising his refined staff, still ignoring the complaints of Black and Latino workers, still pretending to care. Genevieve stayed behind the scenes. She forwarded Malik financial documents, internal policies, and company handbooks. She connected him with a lawyer familiar with workplace discrimination. She never pushed him, but she was always there, watching, supporting, waiting. One night, after finishing his shift, Dante slipped out a staff exit and handed Malik a folded note. This was taped to the back of the manager's office door. It was a printed list of names, all former employees, all people of color. Next to each name, a handwritten note. Too friendly. Needs discipline. Unfit for front. Customer. Complaints. Replace with clean-cut candidate. Malik stared at the list for a long time. He knew some of these people. He had laughed with them, eaten lunch with them, watched them vanish one by one. Now, he understood why. Every night, Malik updated a binder. He organized files, printed emails, sorted audio clips by date. It looked like something from a lawyer's office, but this was his work, his truth, his fight. That he became someone Charles Whitman never saw coming. Focused, sharp, unafraid. In between collecting evidence, Malik met with more former staff. They shared stories that mirrored his own. They spoke of Whitman's coded language, standards, brand consistency, client expectations, words that sounded professional but always seemed to come down on one kind of employee, the kind who looked like Malik, the kind who reminded Whitman of everything he believed did not belong. What started as a plan to gather facts became something deeper. It became a mission to stand up not just for himself, but for everyone who had been quietly pushed out. Everyone who had swallowed their pride because they needed to keep a job. Everyone who had worked twice as hard for half the credit. Malik's mother, Lena, noticed the change in him. "You are different," she said one morning as she poured coffee. "Not angry, not scared. Something else." "I feel awake," Malik replied. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal, smiling at people who had judged him, walking past Umami House and acting like it was just another building. Knowing Charles Whitman still stood in that dining room, blind to the storm coming his way. But Malik had learned something important. Power built on silence can be undone by truth whispered in the right ears, and every whisper, every note, every file was now in place. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Lexington corporate tower was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows, spotless glass table, and soft leather chairs that made people feel powerful just by sitting in them. But that morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Charles Whitman arrived 10 minutes early, wearing his best navy suit and his silver tie pin, shaped like a hawk. He always liked symbols that suggested dominance. He thought the meeting was about expansion plans. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Genevieve Carter entered a few minutes later, not in designer wear, but in a plain black suit. With her were 2 lawyers and a corporate compliance officer. She gave Whitman a polite nod and placed a thick folder on the table. Charles flashed his usual polished smile. "Always nice to see our investors take interest in operations. Let me know how I can assist." Genevieve did not return the smile. "We're here to talk about hiring practices at Umami House," she said simply. Whitman straightened his posture but still looked relaxed. "Of course. Happy to walk you through our approach to staffing and guest standards." She opened the folder. The first page was a chart, 18 months of employment records, color-coded by race and position. It spoke louder than any voice in the room. In small print at the bottom. 100% of black front-of-house employees had been fired. 80% of Latino workers had been reassigned to non-visible roles. 0% of white employees faced terminations for similar issues. Charles laughed lightly, but his voice cracked. "Well, sometimes data can be misleading. Let's try context," said the first lawyer, who clicked a remote. The screen lit up with a transcript. Whitman's voice. "We need a certain type of person out front. Polished, appropriate, refined." Another click. "Find something to write up. Lateness, dress code, attitude. Get them off the floor." Click. Andre was sweet, but not exactly the image we want greeting our VIPs. Charles froze. The words were his. "The recordings, real. Where did you get these?" he asked, voice thin. The second lawyer answered calmly. "All recordings were made with the consent of at least one party. Fully legal under company policy." Whitman's eyes darted around the room. "This is outrageous. You're twisting my words." Genevieve remained still. "We're not twisting anything. We're showing a pattern." She clicked again. The screen now showed photographs of printed emails, subject lines about aesthetic consistency, and handwritten comments on employee files. Finally, the last clip loaded. A grainy video of Whitman in his office, alone, lifting a glass of champagne. "One more problem solved," he said into the empty room, laughing softly. That boy thought kindness could save him. Silence filled the boardroom like thunder. Charles's voice shook. This is insane. That footage, how? Who?" The door opened. Malik Thompson stepped into the room. He wore no suit, no uniform, just a dark button-down shirt and steady eyes. Charles paled. "You? What are you doing here?" Genevieve answered before Malik could. "You fired him for something he never did, then used my name to justify it." Whitman stood up, trying to regain control. He was unprofessional. He crossed a line. Genevieve shook her head. "The only line he crossed was refusing to let you humiliate him." Malik walked to the table, calm and clear. "You thought I was just a waiter," he said quietly. "Someone easy to push aside. Turns out, I was the lesson you never saw coming." He opened a small box and placed it on the table. Inside, printed emails, transcripts, handwritten notes, statements from former employees, signed and notarized. Months of truth, finally exposed. Charles reached for words, but nothing came out. Sweat gathered at his temples. Genevieve turned to him, eyes sharp. You are officially terminated, Mr. Whitman, for creating a hostile work environment, for violating diversity and inclusion policies, and for manipulating internal records. You can't just, he began. I already have, she interrupted. And in 20 minutes, the compliance officer added, your practices will be shared with every employee at Umami House. And with the press. Charles slumped back into his chair like the wind had been knocked out of him. I built that restaurant, he whispered. No, Malik said. You poisoned it. Security entered without a word. Charles tried to speak, but no one listened. He was escorted out, his shoulders slumped, his face red and damp. Malik watched with quiet strength. This was not revenge. It was justice. The boardroom fell silent again. Genevieve looked at Malik and gave a slight nod of respect. You did not have to show up, she said. Malik replied. Yes, I did. Some stories need to be finished face to face. The old warehouse on 124th and Lenox had once been forgotten, its walls stained, its roof leaking, its future unclear, but now sunlight spilled through brand new glass panels. The floors gleamed. A soft scent of cedar and miso floated through the air. Above the entrance, a bold name stood in brushed steel. Mendori, the Japanese word for rebirth. Malik Thompson stood in the center of the dining room, staring up at the new lights. No apron, no fear, just quiet pride. This was no longer someone else's restaurant. It was his. Genevieve Carter had kept her word, and then some. Malik had not only become Mendori's general manager. He now owned 30% of it. He had full control over who was hired, what the culture would be, and how every employee would be treated. The first thing he did? He made calls. Jenny was back as head server. Her poise and grace, once dismissed as too strong, now led the team. Dante Cruz was promoted from line cook to executive sous chef. No more back-of-house shadows. He now stood tall in the open kitchen. Chef Kenji Sato, who had once slipped Malik an envelope of saved tips when he was fired, now returned as Mendori's cultural advisor. He would help keep the food respectful and authentic, something Umami House had only pretended to care about. And the profit sharing? It was real. Every team member received a monthly statement showing exactly how much of Mendori's success they had earned in more invisible labor. No more fear of speaking up. They had all built this place together, and now they would rise together. The opening night was a blur. Lines stretched down the block. Reviews poured in. Transformative. The future of fine dining. Finally, a space that feels like home, no matter who you are. Customers noticed the difference, not just in the food, but in the way they were welcomed. The way staff smiled, not out of obligation, but because they meant it. In the back of the kitchen, Malik stepped out for a breath of air. His phone rang. Hi, sweetheart. It was his mother, Lena. I saw the article, she said, her voice full of emotion. Your photo. That place, it looks like something from a dream. It is, Malik said softly, and I want you to be part of it. You are retiring, effective immediately. Malik, I mean it. No more night shifts. No more cleaning up after people who never see you. You took care of us. Let me take care of you now. There was a long pause on the line. Then, I'm proud of you. Not because you own something. Because you did not let it change who you are. He closed his eyes, letting that sink in. Meanwhile, across town, Charles Whitman was having a very different evening. His latest job? Assistant manager. At a fast food burger chain. Uniform pressed. Smile forced. The workers there knew nothing of his past. To them, he was just another middle-aged man giving orders and pretending to know better. The once feared general manager of Umami House now counted fries, not power. When asked about his old life, he always deflected, blamed corporate politics, or changing times. But the truth never stayed buried. The lawsuit, the headlines, the investigation, it had all stuck that he was no longer welcome in the circles he used to dominate. Back at Mendori, Malik returned to the dining room, just as an elderly black couple stood up from table 12. That the woman placed a gentle hand on his arm. Young man, we haven't felt this scene in a restaurant in years. Thank you. He smiled. You're always welcome here. That was the difference. Not just better food. Not just fair policies. It was something deeper. It was dignity, served with every plate, lived in every shift. Mendori was not just a restaurant. It was proof that spaces built with heart could outlive the ones built on ego. Mendori thrived, not because it followed industry trends, but because it broke them. The dining room was always full of music, of laughter, of people who once felt out of place in restaurants like Umami House. Now, they were the center of it. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Malik walked through the restaurant, adjusting a vase of fresh lilies on a table near the window. Sunlight streamed in, casting a soft glow on the polished wood. An elderly black woman, dressed in a church hat and pearls, stood up from her seat. She looked at Malik with misty eyes. "Young man," she said gently, "thank you for building a place where people like us finally feel like we belong." Malik smiled, deeply moved. "That's exactly why I built it." She nodded, as if she understood something even deeper. "It shows." After she left, Malik stood alone for a moment, letting the silence settle. He thought of all the times he had been overlooked, spoken over, doubted. He remembered Charles Whitman's smirk, the cruel accusations, the quiet shame of walking home in the rain after being fired for simply doing the right thing. But none of that lingered now, because he had not just survived it, he had outgrown it. The best revenge had never been about humiliation. It had been about replacing what was broken with something better, stronger, kinder, fairer. He looked around the space he had built, surrounded by a team that believed in the same values, and knew, without a doubt, that he had won. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were better than you, remember this: success speaks louder than injustice ever will. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories that prove one thing: dignity always finds its way home.